So, like, we're gonna be off. This I can talk about for legitimately 10 hours. This is such an important topic. In our world today, the meaning of marriage has been lost. It's been used as a blanket term to cover lots of things that the church doesn't call marriage. So people tend to be very confused about what the Catholic teaching on marriage actually is. So we're going to dive in that tonight. All right, dues for this talk. Keep an open mind. I might tell you things you don't want to hear. I remember when I actually learned what the teachings were myself, I was pissed off, to be honest with you, because I'd never been taught what marriage actually was supposed to be. So, just keep an open mind and an open heart. Remember that God loves you and wants to meet you where you are. So 12 years ago, there's going to be things I tell you you can't do while you're married. 12 years ago, I was doing a bunch of those things. And I kind of figured out how to work them into my life correctly. So he met me where I was, and now I'm up here talking about it in front of you, telling you the things that he shared with me, and realize that most people are not aware of the church teachings on all things marriage related. So ignorance covers a multitude of sins. The bad news is now you're going to know. So now you're going to be more accountable for these things that maybe we're doing in our lives that we shouldn't be doing. All right, the don'ts for this talk. Do not freak out. I've given this talk many, many times, and I have a perfect record going. I've never had anyone get up and leave. And it's really good, it's so good to be uncomfortable, and society tells us avoid discomfort at all costs. You cannot grow if you're never uncomfortable. And that's what we want to be doing, is we want to be growing. So please do not get up and leave. Typically I give this talk to teenagers. Teenagers are not married people. So when I go through what you can do during marriage, none of them are doing that yet. So it's much less offensive to them. So if you are doing some of these things, like I said, I was doing some of these things as well. Please don't leave. Sit with me with it till the end, I promise. You might not like what I have to say. It might turn your stomach. It might make you feel very uncomfortable. It might make you feel convicted, which is actually a really good word when we're convicted of something we might be doing wrong. But I promise, you'll understand where the teachings come from, even if you don't like the things that I said. All right. Please do not think I'm judging you. That is not what this is about. This is just to inform you of what church teaching is, the way someone at one point informed me. And don't shoot the messenger. I promise none of this is my opinion. To be honest with you, I still don't like some of it. I don't like it because I like to do some of the things that I'm going to tell you you're not supposed to be doing. So please do not shoot the messenger. This is not my opinion. All right, and I teach, if you heard in the intro, I teach confirmation prep, I teach First Communion prep. I've just taken over the middle school class. I do more teaching than I think I actually do my actual job. And this verse, it really scares me. It's in Matthew, and there's also a version of it in Luke, where it says, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it'd be better for him if a millstone," and these are old terms, so a millstone is this ginormous, thousands of pounds boulder that they used to use in the grain mills. It'd be better if that were hung around my neck and I were thrown into the depths of the sea than to lead someone astray. So I take very, very seriously my obligation to not tell you things that will make you comfortable, not tell you things you might want to hear, but to tell you God's truth. And I love this picture too, because the only thing I'm more scared of than drowning is a shark attack. So there's also a shark in this picture that's not what the Bible verse depicts. But for me, it's extra incentive. I don't want to be eaten by a shark. Saw Jaws when I was a kid. Oh my gosh, I still have nightmares about it. I've never been in the ocean, to be honest with you, so I don't know how that would happen. And then it's just that. That is the depth of gravity with which I share this stuff with you tonight. Normally, if I had more time, this is a big subject, I'd tell you some cutesy stories, we build some rapport, and I would be yes, I'm just like you. And I would gain your trust. so that you would know that I'm not doing this to be malicious or there's no ill intent here. Typically, I teach this to my confirmation kids after 2 years of formation. And I've been with them for 2 years. It's actually the last class that I teach, because by that point, they know I have their best interests at heart, and I'm not going to lie to them. So they're much more likely to not get up and walk out. We don't have 2 years, so hopefully that was enough. All right, so to get going, marriage. Marriage is one of our 7 sacraments. It is hard to understand the gravity of marriage if we don't understand what a sacrament is. So we have our 7 on the list, on this list anyway. Holy matrimony is number 5. That doesn't mean that's the order they happen in, that's just how they happen to be up there. A sacrament is an efficacious, which means it physically does something. It's a sign of grace instituted by Christ and entrusted to the church, by which divine life is dispensed to us. These are not my words. This is the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1131. I added the brackets with the yellow because some of the words it uses are hard to understand. So, a sacrament does something. To make it easier, God is invisible. We can't see him. I don't have to see God. He doesn't have a body. He is not here. He's in the spiritual realm. He's invisible, so he communicates himself through things that are visible. Humans like to see stuff. Humans like to touch stuff. Humans like to hear things. We like to taste things. We like to use our senses to experience the world. So God knows this. He created us. So he speaks to us through those things that he gave us to experience him. So that is why the sacraments have like things we can touch, like when we go up to Holy Communion, there's bread and wine. When we are baptized, we see the water and we smell the oils and we see the candle lit. And there's all of these things that awaken our senses so that we know that something is actually happening. Because otherwise, like if I just walked up to Steve and I was like, you're baptized, God could do that. He could baptize him in that moment. But Steve's going to be like, oh, what the heck? Like, did that happen? I don't know. Like when you go to confession and the priest says the words, you are forgiven. You need to hear that. So that is why we have all of these. There's lots of rules, which is unfortunate because humans don't like rules because we don't like to be bound by them. But there are all kinds of rules for things that are important. All right, so the word, oh my gosh, I spelled covenantal wrong, I'm so sorry. There should be an I in there. I Googled how to spell it after I made this slide. So those are the sacraments. So they're avenues for God to show us grace, things that we can see. They're big deals. We have this idea of covenants we're going to talk about because this is what makes marriage so spectacularly amazing in the Catholic Church. There are 2 sacraments that are covenantal. The first is baptism. Not that you're making a covenant with someone, but you are joining the new covenant with God's family. So like we have baptism as like a certificate of adoption into God's family. You are not a member of the body of Christ in God's family until you've been baptized. So when you get that certificate of adoption at your baptism, that's like there's a covenant that you're entering, which God promises to never forsake you, to never leave you, that he will always love you. The second one is what we're talking about tonight. It's marriage. And marriage is a covenant between the husband and the wife and God. So that's, oh my gosh, and then I'll fall. That'll be exciting. All right, so what is a covenant? It is a word we do not hear very often. It's kind of weird, but it's very, very, very important to understand. So a covenant is an exchange of people. Now that sounds oddly like slavery, but kind of like for the married people, it is kind of a little bit like a deal that isn't so great sometimes. But that's the important difference. It is not a business deal. The priest or the deacon does not say, I declare this a joint business venture, go forth, clap for them as we go out, we're going to go party. He says they're married. It's a huge difference. And the biggest difference is the exchange of people, not services. And this is the part that sucks a little bit, but it's fantastic when you think about it. It's indissoluble. You can't break it. Like, there's no way, because God is involved. I'm going to explain that a little bit. Even if humans want to break it, you can't. Which, there's like a really dirty word in the world, like annulment, and then we're going to get into all of that, so don't worry about that. We'll talk about that. Now, I really like Harry Potter. I know it's kind of, it's a little squeamish for some people of faith because there's some witchcraft and things involved, but I love this part of Harry Potter. There's this thing called an unbreakable vow. And I think that it depicts what actual Catholic marriage is, sacramental marriage, better than anything else we see in the world today, better than anything that the church actually demonstrates for us. So, the unbreakable vow is a magical spell that binds two witches or wizards together in an oath, and if either party breaks the terms of the vow, they'll die. Now, can you imagine how much more seriously people would take getting married if you knew that when you broke your vows, you died? Like, people would think twice. Like, I know I would have been far more serious about what I got into when I got married if this would have been like the terms of the agreement. So, it's kind of like, I just kind of wonder where J.K. Rowling got the idea for the unbreakable vow from. Probably Catholic marriage. All right, and look at this. This is kind of how it looks when they do it in the movie. To perform the vow, they join hands, they join their right hands. We do this in marriage. And a third person called the bonder, or like the priest or the deacon, touches their wands to the wizard's hands. One wizard then asks the others 3 separate terms of the vows, which the priest does. We'll see this in a little bit. And the other wizards, they respond, I will. And we respond, I do. So this is like the best depiction of Catholic marriage. I can come up with, the kids love it. If you haven't seen Harry Potter, you don't have to, but like this hit really deep when I saw it. I'm like, wow, that's Catholic marriage. That's sacramental marriage right there, hidden in a Harry Potter movie. All right, now, a lot of people confuse covenants with business deals. So, much like a business deal, covenants establish conditions of a relationship, the promises and consequences of those conditions, and the basis for the relationship going into it. Not what happens afterwards. It establishes everything going in. And that's really, really, really important later for understanding how annulments work. When we see that really dirty, it's horrible. Like, some people just kind of want to vomit when they hear that word because they've had a bad experience, or they know someone that's had a bad experience. I've had people yell at me because I'm Catholic because they had a very bad annulment experience, so we will get there. All right, covenants we see in the Bible, they're all over the place. Noah's Ark, pretty famous story. It's a covenantal story. Noah does the things that God asks. He follows the terms of the deal. He builds the ark. He gathers the animals. He brings in his family. He stays faithful on the ark, and when they come out, God makes this covenant with him, and the rainbow is a symbol of the covenant. So this is actually called the Noahic covenant. We have the Abrahamic covenant, if we go back a little further in Genesis. Now this is kind of disgusting. This is like the idea of a blood vow. But what Abraham had to do was, there were a bunch of animals involved. And God said, get these animals, cut them in half, lay the halves on the other side of each other, and their blood will pool and form a trail, and we're going to walk through that together to seal the covenant between God and man. Gross, right? Disgusting. But we see remnants of this. Sometimes in movies you see people are going to make a deal in medieval times, and they'll slice their hands and then they'll shake on it. Before COVID, there was a thing where if you were going to shake on it, you'd spit on your hand first, because you are giving something of your body, and then you're combining it with theirs to seal the deal. So covenants have resonated through time, but they've kind of lost their importance. So one of the really important things about the Abrahamic covenant is Abraham does all this. He does all of the things God asks. And then, while he's waiting for God to come down and go through the path of the blood together between the split animals, God puts him into a deep sleep, and then he just goes through himself. And it's like a torch of flame, it's described as. Because God knows Abraham can't keep the covenant alone. He needs God to do that. So God takes the weight of the covenant on himself. So in marriage, it's really, really hard to be married. It's really, really hard to keep that covenant, and we have to keep God in it if there's any chance that it's going to work. Also in this, oh my gosh, what was I saying? So this is the Abrahamic covenant. Disgusting, but super serious. Oh, that's what it was going to be. So the idea is that you would walk through the animal sliced in half, and if you broke the covenant, that's what would happen to you. So kind of like the unbreakable vow thing, where if you break it, you die. If you break the covenant, then it's like it'd be better for you to be sliced in half like that too. And God didn't want Abraham to have to deal with that, so he sealed the covenant himself. All right, so then, now that we know what a covenant is and how serious it is, and it's very biblical, we get to marriage. If you do a quick Google search of marriage, the little AI thing that pops up and gives you lots of maybe correct information, marriage is a legally and socially recognized union between two people, also known as spouses. That sounds about right for the world. Something you can leave sounds kind of like a business deal to me. Like there's civil advantages to being married, of course. In the United States, we are one of the only countries that requires a civil marriage license at a religious marriage ceremony. If you go to Europe and in many other countries, you get married civilly with the state, and then you have your religious ceremony. Because we are a Christian nation built on Western ideals, they combined it. You know, it's kind of like, well, it's like a two for one. You don't have to get married twice, you can just get married once. But in doing that, we've lost the specialness, we've lost the real meaning of marriage, because now people think if you just get married, then it's like a sacramental marriage. There's no delineation between the two, and I think it really breeds confusion with people. I would be ecstatic if the government was like, yes, we are separating religious marriages from civil marriages. And that would actually fix a lot of problems. In my humble opinion, I guess maybe I could like run for president or something and then run on that. But the Catechism of the Catholic Church says, now remember our Google search, we sound like a business. This is what the Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us. The matrimonial covenant, there's that word, covenant, by which a man and a woman, and it has to be a man and a woman, and we'll talk about that later, establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life, is by its nature ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. This covenant between baptized persons, and it has to be two baptized persons, one cannot be unbaptized, which I found out and I was very mad that my marriage was not sacramental. Nobody told me that. I might have made different choices. But two baptized persons has been raised by Christ the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament. Now, if you're a hopeless romantic like myself, that sounds so much better than the Google definition of it's just legally and civilly recognized social spouses, you know, that get benefits from the government. All right, so God is in the marriage. Like, you cannot have sacramental marriage without God. So it's kind of like, now, whenever you talk about the Trinity, basically you're preaching heresy. So I'm not trying to be heretical on any level. This is just the best visual I have for this. But this is what a marriage should look like. God in equal parts, wrapping around the man and the woman. Like, they're like equal opportunity lenders. It's kind of like God is your silent partner in your business transaction, or he's like your sole investor. And you shouldn't be making decisions in your marriage without consulting your investor. No person that's good at business would ever do that, and like we should never do that in our marriages either. All right, and marriage reflects the Trinity. Like whenever someone is like, I don't get the whole Father, Son, Holy Spirit thing, you know, St. Patrick, he did the shamrock. I love to think about it in marriage. It's like the best illustration we have. So husband and wife image God by representing the permanent, exclusive covenant relationship, and you're brought into the covenant through baptism, with his people. They also image the Trinity's fruitful love, because when husband and wife are united as one in marital embrace, their love can produce a third person, a child. So, I don't know how much you know about the theology of the Trinity, but the idea is that the Father and the Son love each other so much, from them came the Holy Spirit. So a man and a woman love each other so much that from them come a child. So for me, the easiest way to think about the Trinity is to look at sacramental marriage. And then I'm like, oh, it makes sense. Can I explain it very well? No. But it's just kind of like there's a peace in my heart about it. And I'm like, yes, this is the way it's supposed to be, even though I definitely did not do it that way. All right, so if you were at my talk last year, you were introduced in the anointing of the sick talk to the sacrament breaker. Now, sacraments have a lot of components. The easiest thing to think about is baptism. Like an emergency baptism could be just water dumped over someone's head. In my daughter's case, it was a bottle of Aquafina in the hospital, and a nurse had it, and they just took it, and they said, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. And she was baptized. That's the bare minimum. That's only the meat. And then we see the baptisms at Mass, and we had the candles, and we had the garments, and we had the oils, and we had all of the things. And if you want to get really crazy, you go to a Latin baptism, and there's exorcism prayers, and it's like a 45-minute shindig. It's incredibly beautiful, but it's very long. So, in marriage, same idea. We've been to many weddings, probably. We've seen different levels of all of the things. But what we're going to talk about tonight is the bare minimum, at the absolute bare minimum for a marriage to be sacramental. Okay, so what has to happen? What is the meat? All right, there's 4 elements to the meat of the sacramental marriage. The spouses have to be free to marry. They can't be married to someone else. They can't be under duress. To be honest with you, I was definitely pregnant when I got married, and would I marry him if I wasn't pregnant? Maybe not. I was not free to marry because there was an outside pressure, perhaps, influencing my decision. I was so worried about it that I did not tell the priest I was pregnant in the marriage prep. I lied to him. When he said, is there anything I might need to know in preparation? And I said, no. Because I knew, because it had happened to my brother 2 years before. He had impregnated his girlfriend. They've been married, they have 5 children now. But he would not marry them until the baby was born and they could more clear-headedly make a free decision. And I did not want to be a single unwed mother. I hadn't even had a sonogram yet because I didn't want my maiden name to be on there when the kids looked at it, because I thought, maybe my daughter will never realize that I was pregnant when I got married. So, you have to be free to marry. This is very important. All right. You have to have a free exchange of consent. You have to be consenting individuals. So, for instance, in the Catholic Church doctrine, this sounds kind of archaic, but to be a consenting female, you need to be at least 14, and a consenting male is 16. Which, those are a little bit older rules. In other countries, still a thing. In the United States, we have a little bit different standards. But there are all kinds of rules about how you are able to consent. All right. Number 3. In consenting to marry, you have to intend to be married for your whole lives, as long as you both shall live. That's in the vows, right? This is why we say this. To be faithful to one another, you promise that as well, and to be open to children. Now, this doesn't mean you have to have children. Like, you have to be open to the idea. If infertility ends up being a problem in your marriage, absolute tragedy, horrible. Like, I watch people suffer with this all the time. It doesn't mean your marriage is not sacramental. It just means that you are not able to have children naturally at that time. So, but as long as you are open to the children, it's still sacramental. And that's a common misconception. So, we have that. And the 4th thing is, this sounds kind of fun, their consent is given in the canonical form, which means canon laws, like the laws of the church, the presence of 2 witnesses, and before a properly authorized church minister. Now, even civil unions, like at the courthouse, follow this. You always have, your 2 witnesses, and then the judge signs if you do a civil. They stole that from the Catholic Church, to be honest with you. So those 3 people, any valid marriage has to have 5 people in attendance. 1 is the authorized minister, 2 are the witnesses, and then there is the bride and groom. So minimal attendance for sacramental wedding is 5. All right, so my husband was really mad when we got married because he wanted to write our vows. He's like, well, I have things to say. Well, the priest was like, nothing you have to say, can't wait till the reception. And he was very irritated by it, and I just let it go until I actually studied this, and now I understand why. So the words that they say are what forms the covenant. So if, like a church, or if a priest kind of goes off the rails and says different things, even like in a baptism, if he doesn't use the actual Trinitarian formula for baptism that's valid, you have to redo the baptism. So if you get married and people say things that are not the thing you're supposed to say, that actually makes it so that the marriage is not, and saying it's not valid sounds really, really harsh, but it's just like a matter of like, it is sacramental or it is not. So I don't need to sound crass. But the priest is going to say a couple of things. This is why he has to be there. He's going to ask if they come here to enter marriage without coercion, freely, and wholeheartedly. Well, that covers one of the stipulations. So like the minister is there, the priest or the deacon can do it, and he's there to make sure those 4 things that have to be present at a sacramental marriage happen. So he does that by asking this question, and then he asks if they are going to love and honor each other for as long as they both shall live. Oh, that sounds like one of the stipulations. And then he asks if they're prepared to accept children lovingly from God and bring them up in the law of Christ and his church. So the priest, the minister, makes sure that the form, like the things are laid out in the covenant, like these are the rules you are going to follow. Do you agree? And if they don't say yes, then everybody just goes home. All right, and then he'll say, and he'll be like, oh, okay, now we're to the vows. He'll say, since it's your intention to enter the covenant of holy matrimony, join your right hands, just like an unbreakable vow, and declare your consent before God and his church. And now, like the priest steps out. And now it is just between the bride, the groom, and God. And then the groom has to say these words. He says that he takes the person to be his wife, promises to be true to you in good times and bad. There's like a little bit of like wordplay you could use. There are like a couple small changes and options for people, but it has to be one of the accepted forms, and this is the one you most commonly hear. And then he says that, and then the bride has to say the same thing. Like they have to say these words. And now, as soon as these words are said, they're not just words anymore. They're the formation of the covenant. So after this point, as long as the marriage is consummate, it has to be consummated, which means they have to, the conjugal act has to happen for this to all, it's like the sealing of the deal of the covenant. Like if a marriage happens and say there's a car accident on the way to the reception and like one of them passes away, it's not a valid marriage because the end part, like the sealing of the covenant with the act did not happen. So technically, like they were married legally, but even legally, they actually would really like there to be consummation as well. But yeah, so as long as that happens, the covenant is sealed. It's done. You can never break it. And like if this was Harry Potter, if you broke it, you would die. Now, marriage is unique because in our church, it's ordinarily understood the spouses, as ministers of Christ's grace, mutually confer upon each other the sacrament of matrimony. So when someone says the priest married us, incorrect statement. They married each other, the priest presided. Like he was there to make sure the deal of the covenant was there and it was followed, and then they married each other. But he does have to be there, that's very important. And that is in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1623. And this just says that too. Like, it can be a deacon, it can be a priest. Either one, they have to witness it. And then it's like when they witness it, they are saying, yes, these guys did their stuff, like they are ready to be married. So it's kind of like the stamp of approval from the priest that they're actually entering into the covenant. So, to the best of the priest's knowledge, they're entering a sacramental covenant. All right, and this is also something that irritates people. Why do you have to get married in the church? Like in the building of the church, not just like with the priest outside. This tends to really irritate people who would love to have a destination beach wedding or just have to be outside in nature. The reason is, according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the marriage between two baptized faithful takes place during Mass because of the connection of all the sacraments with the paschal mystery of Christ. So it's interrelated. with everything that happens in the building as well. So, I know it makes people upset. I thought it'd be beautiful to get married on a beach, and then I was told that that was impossible, and I was like, I'm gonna lose my thing. And I was like, okay, I guess we won't do that. All right, so now, we know what makes a marriage. Now we get to the thing that happens when the marriage doesn't work. Okay, so annulments. My vast apologies to anyone who has had to go through this process. I know that it's very painful, it's lengthy, it's frustrating, but I promise it's for your good. It's actually supposed to be healing. So, the annulment process does not break the covenantal bond of marriage. It's not possible to break it. Humans can't do it. You can leave it, but you can't break it. And Jesus tells us this himself. Like in Matthew and Mark, the Pharisees are questioning Jesus, hoping to entrap him. And they ask him about marriage. And he says, he says, what therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Because God joined the marriage, he was part of the covenant, man physically can't break it. You can get divorced, but you can't break your covenantal marriage. All right, so what is the annulment process? It's an independent investigation, which sounds horrible. It's like a CSI episode. It's an independent investigation to determine if the marriage on the day of the wedding, that's super important, entering the covenant on that day was actually a covenant to begin with. Anything that happens after the day of marriage does not matter at all in the process of determining if it was a covenant or not. That really irritates people. You have to be very careful when you enter marriage. All right, and our good bishop, Bishop Barron, he says, and this is one of his quotes that I just love, he's like, human beings always surround precious things with laws. Sacramental marriage, all of our sacraments are precious. It's very irritating sometimes how we protect them, but the protections are there for good reason. All right. Okay, so there are 3 categories to qualify for an annulment, which sounds horrible. It's like you're winning a sweepstakes. But there's not really a better way to say, was your marriage valid on the day that you said it was, or was it not? So that's why we should call it a declaration of nullity. If you're a math person, we have things called null sets. Null set just means there's nothing in there. So a declaration of nullity just means that the sacrament was missing from the marriage. Were you legally married? Yes. You were definitely legally married, but you were not covenantally married. So all it does is determine that it was legal, not covenantal. So defects of consent is category number 1. It's things like you can't marry someone in the church sacramentally if they kidnapped you. In Beauty and the Beast, this is a horrible example of Munchausen by proxy, and that could never be a sacramental marriage because he imprisoned her. So that never, ever, ever, ever could be. If she wanted to divorce him, the Catholic Church would say yes. It wasn't valid entering because there was no way you could consent if you'd been kidnapped. Oh my gosh, I had a sheet of paper. I'm so sorry. I have to look in my bag. Oh, because it's in my computer. All right. So other defects of consent. If you're using the other person to get a green card with mass immigration, this is actually a huge problem. We see it in Rochester all the time. People get married to get the green card, and then they go and they try to get annulment when they meet the person they actually want to marry because their first marriage was a sham to get the ability to stay here. Also, drug and alcohol use. You cannot give open consent if you've had a drink or you have any kind of mind-altering substance. Or say, if for instance the groom has a girlfriend on the side and he intends to keep her as his girlfriend after they're married. All of those conditions would make it so that the marriage was null. Impediments. Now this is a little salty for some people, if you were married before and you did not get an annulment from the first marriage, you can't get married again in the church, which that really hurts because I know people that suffer with this, and they've just gone ahead and got married anyway, and they've left the Catholic Church. So, these are hard, they hurt our hearts, they kind of turn our stomachs, but it's a thing. And especially if they didn't know, Like, I was dating a guy a couple years ago. He'd been married 3 times. He didn't tell me until we were quite into it, and then he went through the process to get 3 annulments, and it was so good that they did that, because I probably would have just married him. And instead, I had all of this extra time, and it was like, well, why did these marriages not work? And then I realized I really didn't want to marry this guy. So I am a big fan of the annulment process, because it saved me marrying the wrong person again. If you are too young to get married, like I said, the ages of 14 and 16, or if you, now this sounds bad, if you are impotent and can't perform the sexual act, you cannot have a sacramental marriage. You would have a Josephite marriage. Mary and Joseph never conjugally were together. That's a Josephite marriage, not a sacramental one. So you can be married and it can be blessed by the church, but it's not sacramental. And then there are defects of form. Catholics can't get married outside the Catholic Church without a special dispensation. Like I said, you can't go get married outside on the beach without very special permission from your bishop. Or the form of marriage is not observed, like if you wrote your own vows and your priest let you do that, which you really should not do, that nullifies the marriage as well. So there's all kinds of stuff. Now, there's the good and the bad. The good thing is, like, if they declare it a null marriage, you can get married again to the person that you want to. That's good, I guess, but it's bad because your marriage wasn't sacramental, and that's really sad. Now, when we really get here, because people that get the answer that yes, it can be annulled are very happy. Now, the other half of the people who don't get the answer they want, because it's no, that's really hard. It's really, really, really hard, because they can't get married again in the church until that spouse dies. Death breaks the covenant. And man, that is a really hard pill to swallow if you really want to get married to someone else and you really want to have it be sacramental. But the good news is, I mean, you can't get married in the church again, but you had a valid sacramental marriage, which is good. You entered a covenant validly. The bad news is that you can't get married again. Well, they're still alive. So it's hard, but like I said, we have rules to protect things that are sacred. And if they just gave an annulment to everyone that asked for one without valid reason, the covenant would be trash. It wouldn't mean anything. So it kind of sucks sometimes, to be honest. It's really hard. I have a friend that waited 7 years. She and her boyfriend both needed annulments. He got one, she didn't. And they waited 7 years. They went ahead and got married in her backyard. She had her best friend, who was a woman, come from Hawaii, get like a you can perform weddings to.com certificate to civilly marry them. She still comes to church, but she stays away from the sacraments because she knows she's not in communion with the church, but she doesn't want to leave the church. I would not want to be her. Oh my gosh. It is way easier to have your spouse die than to get divorced. Oh my gosh. So, like, these are real problems that real people have, and it can be really horrible sometimes. All right, so why did Moses allow divorce in the Old Testament? Because originally, divorce was couldn't do it. Absolutely not. Well, what happened was the hardness of men's hearts. Men were killing their wives so they could get remarried. So Moses approaches God, and he says, God, the men are killing their wives. That's way worse than just letting them get divorced. It's like the lesser of two evils. So Moses comes back to the people, and he's like, God is going to allow divorce, but this is not something to be excited about because your hearts are so hard, you can't follow God's law. So it was never ever a good thing, but God allowed it. But then Jesus, when he comes around, he gets questions about it, and they're like, well, Moses allowed divorce, what do you say? And he says, whoever divorces his wife, unless the marriage is unlawful, so like it wasn't a sacrament, like it wasn't valid, and marries another, commits adultery. And his disciples said to him, if that is the case of a man with his wife, it's just better to not get married. Like if you can't just leave when you want to, it'd be better to just not do it at all. And he answered, not all can accept this word, but only to those for whom it is granted. So this is a tough teaching. Like, people would leave when Jesus would teach about really hard things sometimes, because they're like, yeah, this was great when he was performing miracles, but now he's saying the words, and the words aren't so nice. So we're just going to not follow him anymore. So Jesus himself said that you can't just get remarried. But this is where the annulment process comes from. It's the way to determine if the marriage is unlawful or if it was null, if it wasn't really a sacrament. All right, so if you haven't left yet, this is exciting because it's going to get worse. All right, so there's going to be more stuff I have to tell you that you might not want to hear. Okay, so, but to get to that, I'm hoping I'm doing okay in time. Okay, we can do this really fast. All right, Natural Law Theory 101. Natural law is the philosophical school of thought come up with by St. Thomas Aquinas. Love this guy, back in the 1200s. He asked every hard, the Summa Theologica is like the greatest written work ever. And he asked all the hard questions. So he asked, how can someone go to heaven if they don't know God? If no one has ever told them about them? How on some weird island, we just found people that are undisturbed, and they have drones flying over this island, and they're like debating going in and seeing the people, and they're like, no, just leave them be. Well, if those people, how do they go to heaven? Well, Thomas is like, well, let's just think about people who don't know God, and we're going to explain how they can live righteously because God's law is written on our heart. So he came up with this thing called the 7 basic goods. This is a list of them. I've shared the slides with Becca, so you'll get this. The big thing to know is that this is the best way to live your life. It's good to survive. It's good to reproduce, or things, your line dies. It's good to educate your offspring, because if you don't educate them, man, look around the world today right now. This is people not educating their offspring well. You're always going to seek a higher power and try to fill it with something. Whether it's God or whatever, like we all know, sometimes it's shopping, sometimes it's other things. We try to fill it, but it doesn't really fill us. You're meant to live in society. Humans are pack animals. You're also designed to avoid offense. Like you feel like guilt and shame when you do something wrong because you don't want to be shunned. And then you fix that behavior to be welcomed back to the pack. And then humans are inquisitive, which is good because that fosters our development. So that's it. Natural law theory in a nutshell. All right. So essentially, it's like saying, my life is valuable. Therefore, Steve's life is like my life. And his life is valuable. I shouldn't kill myself, therefore I shouldn't kill Steve because that would violate natural law. So it's like it's a type of thinking where you can kind of just like plug in a situation, and it's engineers love this. Actually, a lot of atheists love this too. You plug in a situation, and natural law will tell you what to do about it. You don't even have to think. It just tells you the outcome. So there's some fancy words up here, but you take one of the basic goods, let's say life. And the positive injunction is that we want to promote life. This is the thing we always want to be doing because this is the good. It could be caring for the sick, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, etc., etc. Which means like there has to be something we shouldn't be doing because that would be wrong. If we were supposed to be doing the good, we shouldn't do the wrong. So the opposite is don't kill anybody, don't murder them. So this is where the church teaching on abortion comes from. We're not going to talk about abortion very much, but right now, that's all you need to know is this is exactly where. The church always taught that, and Thomas came up with like this formula, for lack of a better word, and it would just output church teaching. So he was pretty sure that this is inspired by God. So, for instance, like we get to this, and it's like, oh, well, it's really bad to kill someone, and we always want to promote life. So what if a woman's pregnant and her life is in danger? Well, then whose life do we promote? The mother or the child? Now, we literally have saints in the Catholic Church. St. Giannola. There are several other blessings that we have in servants of God that shows the child's life over their own. You do not have to die so that your child can live. You are able to choose yourself, choose a treatment that could save you, and the horrible, it's never good, the really, really horrible thing that comes from it is the child dies. The intention is extremely important. The intent is not to kill the child. The intent is to save the mother. This is not abortion. This is the only time it's called health care. And the world has conflated that and said that it's all health care. So we're not going to get into that too much more. But just so you know, the church has a way. It's not asking you to die. We hold up these people as saints that have chosen the baby over themselves that have died because of that. And then we have No birth control. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that, but you can't use birth control when you're Catholic. Because reproduction is a basic good. Therefore, we want to procreate. Therefore, we should not prevent procreation. And there's another way we're going to look at this too with natural law. And there's a little confusion. We have this thing called natural family planning. Named well because it works with a woman's natural cycle. And it's just like, oh, here are the days you are fertile. Here are the days you are not. Just if you would like to space your children that you are willing to welcome from God, only avoid those days. So it's a very natural way to do things. Church approved. It is not a form of contraception. It's like a form of spacing, you could say. All right, so that is so hard to get through natural. This is like I told you, I can talk for 10 hours. Okay, well, if it's natural and it's written on our hearts, why do humans suck at it? Like, we are all doing things that are wrong and we like it. Well, ignorance and emotion. We're emotional creatures, and we like to be ignorant. It sucks to have to let the old ideas die and bring in the new ones that are right. So, in a nutshell, we think what we think is good, but we're actually wrong because no one taught us. And there's some things we're going to get to in the next couple of minutes that maybe you were taught were right by the world that are actually wrong. So basically, no matter how awesome God made you and His laws written on your heart, you have to have some understanding of actually how to be awesome. So that's one reason. And the other one is emotional. Oh my gosh, I live with 3 teenage girls. Oh, emotion runs wild in our house. It overpowers your reason, and I'm sure you can all think of at least one circumstance where you knew what you should be doing, and then you just really didn't do it because you were emotionally thinking eating would be a thing. Basically, you know what the right thing to do is, but you just forget to be awesome as God created you. All right, so what did Aquinas conclude? Morality is grounded in God. God created the moral order. Following natural law will make your lives better. Often, when there is an evil in the world, if you start tipping back the dominoes, you find natural law violation after natural law violation, and it's usually cascaded with the initial violation that just leads to more bad things. So, this is where it's going to get a little bit hairy. Okay, so truth, objective versus subjective. The idea that things are true whether we like it, know it, or believe it is God's truth. That's objective. The world today is like, oh, live your truth, proclaim your truth. The transgender phenomenon is one of these things. This is my truth, how I perceive myself. Therefore, you must join my reality. They have a subjective reality that is not our objective reality. You do not have to join their reality. And then that subjective truth is just like, oh, it conforms to your reality. Like if I asked Steve how he felt today. How do you feel today?
Great.
Great? Are there days you don't feel great?
Yes.
Oh, his subjective reality changed. So it changes all the time based on what's going on in your life. So the objective reality of God's truth is what we need to try to conform ourselves to, because our subjective reality changes all the time. The weather changes. The subjective reality of the weather changes. All right, so that's important. So then we get to this idea of objective truth. So there's what something is, like this is my cell phone. And then there is what something is for. Now, what is a cell phone for? Well, I talk on it, I text on it, I spend way too much time on it. So it's like the nature of the thing. And it reveals, like what I use it for reveals what it is. Now, as parents, I'm sure you have uttered the phrase, you are going to break that because you are not using it for what it's for. Like if I could think of how many times I had to tell my kids to knock it off because they were going to wreck something because they weren't using it right. They were violating the nature of the thing and they were going to destroy it. So, like this idea is very important for the next things we're going to do. So, there's what it is and what's it for. Now, this is a good if I use it correctly. Like, if I throw this at one of those beautiful stained glass windows and break it, now this good thing has become a weapon. And I'm not using it for what it's for, and now it's dangerous. So I just think sometimes God looks down, and He's like, that's not what that is for. And just like, so like, stop it, that's not what it's for. Like, you're wrecking, like, you are not using it for what I intended it for. And that is where we're going to get into some of the hard things we're going to talk about. Okay, so quickly. Say aliens invaded, and who knows, the Pentagon has said UFOs are real, so this could actually be happening. An alien race is coming, they put things in their mouth, it comes out their butt. Like, what is happening? Like, why would that's gross? Why are they doing that? So, what do you think eating is for? Any guesses? Why do you eat? Nutrition. Oh my gosh, yeah. What is it for? Nutrition. Like, we need nutrition. We need it. And because God wants us to do the thing that's the best for us, what does he do? He makes it pleasurable. Because if it hurt to eat, you wouldn't eat, and then you would die. So, we have this idea that eating is for nutrition and pleasure. It has two natures, two things God intended it for. Now, you can emphasize the one over the other. Like, we emotionally eat sometimes, not gonna lie, I really like my ice cream when I'm upset. And I am emphasizing the pleasure over the nutrition. But I'm not cutting off the nutrition, I'm giving way too much of it. Or, like, I also then will be like, oh, I'm gonna fast today and I'm gonna eat a protein bar and I'm gonna have a smoothie that doesn't taste very good. And I emphasize the nutrition over the pleasure. But neither one is cut off. So, these are the ideas we're working with. So we have nutrition and pleasure. Okay, so now, this is not meant to offend anybody. Eating disorders are serious business. But we know they're wrong. It turns our stomach to think about people that suffer with this. So if we think about bulimia, which is when you intake food and then vomit it up so that you don't, like, gain any weight, what nature does that violate between pleasure and nutrition? Like, what is being violated naturally here?
Nutrition.
Yeah, nutrition. We're taking the pleasure of eating, and then we're throwing away the nutritional aspect. So we're blocking completely one of the natures of the thing, and it's just intrinsically wrong. We just understand that that is not a good thing to do. And then if you look at all the things that happen with your health, if you're constantly puking, it wears away the enamel on your teeth. It does all kinds of absolutely horrible things to you. So technically, bulimia is a sin. However, when mental health is brought into things, it negates the culpability of the person. It's still wrong. They should seek help, but it's not like a terrible, terrible sin for them. All right, so we move to anorexia. That's when we just don't eat. So what are we rejecting of the natures? Both. I'm refusing to eat, even though I'm freaking starving. I was anorexic for like 7 minutes one time. I tried. I had like food way too much, and the idea that I wasn't going to eat anymore was too much, and I just had to eat. And they're rejecting the nutrition and the pleasure from eating. So it's actually a double violation of natural law. And it doesn't make it like worse. It's just they're equally bad. But it really just is like, yeah, this is why we know it's wrong. And then also, like, the first basic good of promoting life, it violates that too. So it all kind of fits together. Okay, we're back to our aliens. All right, there's no little kids in here, right? Okay, all right, so the aliens now are going to be watching the sexual act. Now, these aliens just reproduce by, like, splitting in half. They have never seen something like this before. Once again, you gross when you think about it. What are they doing? That is super disgusting. And then this thing falls out of the women sometimes, and she's really in a lot of pain. Why would you do this to yourselves, humans? So, what do you think the nature of the sexual act is then? Why do we do this? Procreation, yeah. Babies. We want to have babies because that's natural good number 2. That's the basic good number 2 is we need to procreate or our species dies. And because we will die if we don't do it, guess what God did? It's pleasurable. You bond together with your partner. It's so cool, like the hormones and like the way, I'm a biologist, like the way systems fit together, there's this hormone called oxytocin that's released when you are engaging in the conjugal act, and it bonds the woman to the man, whether they're married or not. So if you, like, women are incapable of one-night stands because oxytocin prevents that. It bonds you to that person, whether you like it or not. Average effect of oxytocin, 2 years, which is why most marriages break up or relationships within 2 years, because all of a sudden the oxytocin stops stimulating the brain as it normally would, and then all of a sudden the woman realizes, I don't really like this guy very much. So it's a very dangerous, it's like if I started a fire right here on the carpet, versus putting a fire in the fireplace. It's a really good thing, but in the wrong place, it's incredibly devastating and dangerous to you. All right, so, as I stated before, Catholics are not supposed to use birth control. So, of the two natures of the sexual act, which, or both, or whichever you think of these does it violate to use birth control? Procreation, yeah. So the church is not trying to get in your business. It's trying to show you that this was God's plan. And like I said, NFP, natural family planning, is a way to do it. You just have to be a little bit more disciplined about yourself. And to be honest with you, hormonal birth control is poison. Like, it's one of the worst things for you. It's carcinogenic. Like it says on the warning label, do not smoke when you take this product. Not because smoking screws with it, but because it like quadruples your chance of cancer. And it does not say that on there, because if it said that on there, no one would take it. If you use hormonal birth control for more than 10 years, rates of hypothyroidism in women, obviously because women are taking it, go up 237.5%. So there are a slew of women my age that were put on hormonal birth control when we were in high school that have hypothyroidism right now, for no reason, but that it screws with some of the nutrients and your ability to absorb them. So over time, it causes hypothyroidism. And not to mention, like, it changes your personality when you're on it. It also changes what you're attracted to, which is why you'll see people date for years and years and years, and you'll see them divorced in 2 years, because they were on birth control, they got married, they went off to have a baby, and realized they were not attracted to their husband anymore, because the birth control screwed with their attraction. So it is extremely dangerous, to be honest. Now, is it always evil to be on birth control? No, there are nuns that take birth control. It's intent, remember? So if your intent is to treat something medically, say you have really heavy periods, or there's something that you need to balance your hormones with, you can take it. If the unfortunate side effect is that then you're not able to conceive a child, but you would be open to it, it is not a sin to take it, and it doesn't violate natural law. Because once again, now it becomes healthcare versus being something that defies God. All right, so that's birth control. Oh, this is a fun one because we don't like to say this word out loud. So, masturbate, this is fun when I do this to the teenagers because all the boys, they try to crawl under their tables. So masturbation, they teach this to kids in sex ed, and they're like, do this instead. But it violates natural law. How? Wait a second. It's both, right? There is no chance at procreation. You're not unifying with anybody. And actually for young men, they have found that there is a circuit in the brain, like there's a loop, that doesn't complete itself when there's not a partner. And they don't even know what that does to kids, but they know it really screws with their brains. And this is like ongoing research that they're doing right now. So it's actually extremely unhealthy for that to happen for too long. All right, and this also means, even in marriage, we can't be doing this. Now, Pope John Paul II, who was a saint, came out and said, if you do some of this stuff with the intent to end at consummation, it's okay. If the female needs more help or the male needs more, so as long as this is part, it's the intent again. If this is part of your conjugal act and what you are doing, and it's going to lead to the procreative act, all of a sudden now we don't violate natural law anymore. So also you cannot use pornography for the same kind of reason. Usually masturbating by yourself leads to watching porn. Porn is like sex outside of marriage. It's all kinds of oh my gosh, that starts a whole slew of problems. And then it rewires people's brains. It's really, really, really bad. But once again, it's like that first domino tips, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one, and another one. And it's like 99% of people that are in jail for sexual offenses started off with a chronic masturbation problem. They moved to pornography, objectified women, and just didn't care if the woman was consenting anymore or not because they just wanted a real one. And so that's kind of it's like a kaleidoscope of dominoes. Now, does that happen to everyone? No. But it can happen to people. So we want to stay away from that. All right, now this one's a hard one too. All right, IVF. Now, certain levels of IVF are okay. Just some hormone shots like NFP to naturally help your body do what it's already doing is different. That is not one of these sexual sins that we have to stay away from. However, as soon as we start harvesting eggs And we just talked about masturbation. The male has to masturbate to put the sperm in the cup. So see how the dominoes, oh my gosh, here we go. We're going. The kaleidoscope is starting. So how does IVF, like when we're forming humans in petri dishes, violate natural law? Yeah, there's no, because it seems like it should be good, right? It seems like it should be good because we're trying really, really hard to procreate. We're struggling to do that. But it's not. And most people don't realize, like, egg harvesting, oh my gosh, is he okay? He's so cute. I just want to check that one. Okay, and I know we're getting close to being over time, so we'll pray for that. But egg harvesting in women is very expensive and painful. So it's not like they take one egg. They take way more than one egg. They usually take like 10. And when we fertilize the eggs, it's not super economical and cheap to only fertilize like 1 or 2. So what do? They'll fertilize all of them because otherwise the eggs will be wasted. So you have a bunch of humans that now exist in a petri dish. And where do they go? A freezer. And you have human beings frozen in time, and all the time, like this, you hear about this all the time, the wrong eggs get implanted in the wrong people. The freezer units sometimes malfunction. This just happened in like Florida, like 4,000 babies were lost that were frozen waiting for implantation. Like it's like a mass genocide sometimes when things go wrong with these places that do these procedures. I'm sorry, I was like watching. So like, it seems good. And then we add in like abortion to the mix too, because it's not super economical to just implant one embryo. Because there's a good chance the embryo is not going to take. On average, they implant 4. So you have 4 children that are implanted, and that's where the odds are best that 1 takes. So you lose 3 of your kids in that effort to have the 1. And sometimes, like, does anyone remember Octomom? Octomom used IVF, had 8 eggs left in her freezer storage, and just said implant them all, and all 8 took. And so she was highly encouraged to do selective reduction, which sounds lovely, doesn't it? But it means kill some of your kids so that there's a better chance that the other one survives. So they'll just take like an ultrasound and they'll be like, boy, girl, who do you want to keep? So now we have, the dominoes are falling because now we're getting to the point where you're aborting your own children. So IVF, although like the end is good, and it doesn't mean people conceived in that manner are evil. There's like, God lets good come from all of our bad choices. But it's just something like we have to think about morally and how that affects everyone around us. All right, here's another fun one. Oral sexual pleasure. If you are going to, as a man, release your seed outside of the procreative area, we could say, that is actually called the sin of onanism. And God struck down a dude named Onan in the Old Testament because his brother's wife died. His job was to take her as a wife. He didn't want to have children with her, but he was obligated to have the sexual act with her, and he pulled out, and he spread his seed beside her, and God struck him down. So it's actually the sin of onanism to do that. So we have to be careful with this too. So which part of natural law does that violate then? If we are going to be doing things orally and not conjugally together. I know it's like weird, we don't want to talk about this stuff, because no one has ever taught us about this stuff. It is so awkward and weird, right? Well, you can't procreate if your stuff doesn't go where it's supposed to go, and you're not really unifying together in the way that God intended. So it's procreation, and like unification gets really weird. You don't even know how to describe it. All right, so we have that, and then okay, now this is another painful one, because we all know people, and we all want people we love to be happy. But however, this is why the church will never, ever say same-sex couples can get married. It stems from this. It's part of the natural law, which means it's God's truth. All right, so if people are having same-sex relations, what part of natural law is violated? The procreative side. There's no chance. Two females literally can't unify together. Two males, kind of, sort of, ish, kind of, sort of. But it's another double violation of natural law. So, sometimes people want to spice up their marriage and bring in like another person. We cannot do that. Because number one, marriage is between man and woman, and you're supposed to be faithful to each other. On top of that, same-sex relations also violate natural law. Okay, so, nobody left. That is so exciting. Well, someone tried to leave. I'm just kidding. Oh, too soon. But yes, I know that was a lot. And at one point, I knew zero of that. I definitely used birth control. It failed. I have 2 children from double failed birth control. By the third one, I was just like, I'm giving up because God's going to make me be pregnant, whether I like it or not. And then after that, actually, you can't get a vasectomy, or if you have to do a hysterectomy for your health, like that's a thing, but having a vasectomy for the convenience of not needing to worry that you're going to have more children also is not okay in marriage. And it's not because the church is a bunch of old meanie pants. It's not because they're homophobic. It's not because they're bigoted. It's because natural law. And if that really is God's law, which the church has always believed, specifically since Thomas Aquinas actually wrote it down, but all of the teachings of the church already existed before that. And then as he computed each one into natural law, it was just like, output what the church teaches. So, it's consistent, it's beautiful, like, I love how it functions, but then you're putting humans in there, and that makes it hard, because some things hurt our hearts. But it's like, you have to be able to trust that God has, like, the plan, and, like, if God's right about everything else, if Jesus is really in the Eucharist, if the church is right about, like, every other thing, they're not wrong about this. And, like, it's really hard, like I said, it's really, really hard. I had to sit with it for a long time, for sure. And I was like, I'm going to have to reorient my life, because I've been doing it all wrong for a really long time. And I was so pissed off. Number one, I found out my marriage wasn't sacramental because my husband wasn't baptized. I found out I wasn't supposed to be using birth control. I found out that we shouldn't be using masturbation. We shouldn't be using porn either. We shouldn't be doing any of these things. And I was just super pissed no one told me. Because my life, there was not a good marriage. It wasn't going well. And it's kind of like you start flipping back the dominoes and you're like, yep. All of them, natural law violations. I just kind of married the wrong person too, because it was my will, not God's for sure. But yeah, so it's just kind of, it's a lot to take in. I know. I was like in stun shock for like a week, and I was like, you know what? I have to figure out how to not be a hypocrite. If I want to be a good Catholic, I need to bring my life in line. Now, this is hard, for sure. It's like the ideal, like when God created the thing, he's like, this would be the perfect model of how this should work well. But then he put humans into it. And humans are phenomenally fantastic at justifying anything they would rather do than what we're supposed to be doing. So it's just something we're striving towards. And the beautiful thing is like he's given us all these rules. And I always try to tell my kids, they're like bumpers. Like, you put the bumpers up at the bowling alley. We have our guardrails on the highway. Like, he's like, here are your guardrails, and you're free to move within them. But if you crash off the side, that's okay too, because if you go to confession, you can come back, and you'll be right inside the guardrails again. And you go off, and you go back, and that's our path back. God was like, here's your path back to me. Here's your path to heaven. And he's like, but if you fall off, you can come back. And our whole lives are just like falling off and coming back over and over and over. Okay, so I just have to make sure I had a list of things I was supposed to for sure cover. Yeah, I think, if, like, say my husband did die, and magically came Jesus, and had this mass reversion, and he was baptized, we did not have a valid sacramental marriage. The church has an answer to everything. People have been the same for the last 8,000 years. There's no problem, there's no situation you have that's different than already there are like a set rule book for, like a guidebook. So the church has a process called convalidation. So it just means you get like remarried, not sort of like you're getting remarried, but you're getting married for the first 9 sacraments. So if my husband had been baptized and he would have come into the Catholic Church, we could have had a convalidation ceremony, and it would make our marriage sacrament. So like I said, God always has a way to come back. There's always a way to come back in, and there's nothing you can do where you're too far to come back. All right. That's what I know. That was a ton. Literally, that was like a college level. That was crazy. So if you guys have any questions, you can come and ask me if you just want to yell at me or something. Sometimes you just have to get that energy out. But otherwise, thank you for listening. And thank you for not